I think my first question really is, what was your journey to the UK? Because from my understanding, you and your family were political refugees from Iran. So what was that journey? What do you remember of Iran?
Yeah, so I became a jihadi, came on a boat. No. It's quite interesting. Basically, there's a reason that people like me and my mother, because I was not a refugee myself. I was technically called a son of a political refugee with my mother, and I'll get to how that happened. I was born in Iran, came here as a kid. The reason that even someone like her and myself, as technically first generation, could integrate compared to, generally speaking, any country, any culture, it takes at least second generation at least to actually integrate. There are exceptions. So back in the day, even like 60s and 70s, when you had a smaller wave of Commonwealth migrants coming here, they could also integrate from certain places, but that was for obvious reasons, because the Brits were already there. But otherwise, there are also some cultures that coincidentally are more compatible. And it's so random that some of them are random. The Persian culture and the British culture. It makes no sense, but I can prove it without actually having evidence. Just like how overall, even as a witty thing, we say British people don't see themselves as Europeans, but as Brits. Iranians don't see, Persians don't see themselves as Asians, they see themselves as Persians, and all around them, you got all these other random cultures, like from the Arabs to the Afghans and all the others, and they're just like there. They're like, we're different, we're different. It's nothing like racist or like arrogant, it's just their own pride of their nationalism. And coincidentally, there was also a lot of other similarities. The Iranians also have dry sense of humor and sarcasm and basic politeness and all this that we have. That even when I go to mainland Europe sometimes, I get so angry in like Berlin or Paris, but people don't stand on the right side of the escalator. It's those basic things, or hold the door. So I think for those reasons, and generally speaking, because of the reason that my mother and then I came here, which was, it's quite funny because when I was a kid still in Iran, my mom was always saying, because she was always like reading all these books like Queen Victoria and everything else, and she was saying to me, Maya, we were the Brits who were born somewhere else. I never understood what she meant until came here, grew up, then I realized, oh, that makes sense. So the story is, can't really get into too much detail because of basic intelligence, but my mother was not even a political person. In Iran, I think you guys have heard now over the last few months because it became a big news, they have morality police, and they got these vans that go around, tell people how to dress, how to walk, what to do, what not to do. Women can't really have like chewing gum, and most of the time they turn the blind eye. But my mother was coming from shopping, it was a windy day, carrying 2 plastic bags, her headscarf went a little bit back, the morality police van stopped and said, you're arrested. Last thing you do in that situation is run away, because that just escalates things. What did my mother do? She ran away. Like, why? I know why she did it, because it was a time when it was always been happening, but especially that summer, a lot of these morality police officers in the vans, they used to take women and rape them. So she ran away just to avoid that. And she just ran and ran and ran. Coincidentally, the first store and building that she found she ran into happened to be the British Embassy. So I'm literally sitting here right now doing everything I do, only by coincidence because my mother found the first door. So, but it all makes sense. And I'm not going to go some sort of like hippie destiny or fate sort of thing that, oh, it makes sense. But at least a coincidence. Funnily enough, like 10 minutes before, let's just say, she was telling me stories about Queen Victoria and how we were the Brits who were born somewhere else, and the first door she finds is the British Embassy. This is where I can't really get into the details, but the British Embassy helped her come here, got her out. So she is a true definition of a traditional political refugee. Didn't even have to illegally enter like any of that. And then she came here, and after a few months or a year, everything was sorted, approved, paperwork, and I was under 18, so legally I was allowed to just come. So I got first class Heathrow, hello. Didn't have to get a boat. So that's how I came here. And the funniest story is that usually for any culture, any person coming to a developed country, usually come from either a developing country or underdeveloped, we always talk about the culture shock. Because the culture shock always means you look up, you're like, oh, that's new. It sounds really weird, but for people like me, my mum, because we were basic middle class in Iran, which apparently the word is so toxic here, because like people always confuse upper middle class to actual ordinary middle class. Like most Brits are middle class, but it's a bad word. So we were not like posh or rich, it was just basic middle class. And so in Iran, you know, I went to a private school, but it's not really a sexy thing. Mostly old schools are private anyway, and they're not really expensive. But we had good education system and standards and everything else. So my culture shock was actually the other way around. I was looking down. I ended up, when we came here, because we were still new, I ended up on a council estate in Lewisham, South East London. And went to a comprehensive school, Church of England, and I was like, what is going on here? In my head, I was expecting glamour, like in a Buckingham Palace. I was like, oh, this is funny. I was like, yeah, 10, 11, and we were doing algebra and all the GCSEs, and I was getting bored, because I was like, I did this when I was 7. And the kids who were like year 11, they were struggling. And I was like, and the teachers were like taking it seriously. I was like, what is going on? And also the teachers couldn't control the class. The students, the pupils, had more power than the teachers, which I never understood. In Iran, teacher walks in, you have to stand up. There's nothing tyrannical about it. It was just basic Victorian times, like discipline. Apparently that's controversial these days. So that was the kind of journey, and it was easy for us to integrate. And I was the reason I became not a communist was mainly because in Lewisham, even though it was a bit of a shock that it was basic deprived. So for a British level deprived, it wasn't like, because I always say people who were complaining about poverty, were like, if you want poverty, I can show you. I can take you back to Iran or Africa or other places in Asia. But it was still for the standards of the West. You know, but I realized there was a problem. It was these people have been convinced that they should stay poor, and the system kept them poor to an extent. But there were still a lot of them, but in basic poverty. I'm saying it to just make it simplified. They still had Sky TV, they still had a house, food, and they could get a train or a bus to go to college. They had EMA, which was like, I don't know if you remember, the £30 free money, and all the kids were just using it to buy CD video games. So for me, that was still privilege. But they were all complaining, and they were all very diverse, that area. A lot of black kids, and like, you know, in my school they had like 4 white kids. That was funny. But they were all complaining, saying this is the worst country, we're all going to die. And this was still Labour government. This is like Blair Brown's, like, I think Brown. So it was still the worst country. If you're poor, you're going to die. And that made me even more proactive to become more pro-freedom and pro-defending the basic values that created the West. The old school, classical liberal values. And I was like, you shouldn't be that pessimistic. But they didn't really do anything about it, which now created this. And there's more chaos now, because those people were so complacent. And it's not just them, and everybody else in the establishment. They didn't take the threat seriously at the time. They didn't appreciate what they had, and they buried their head in the sand, and now we have to deal with backlash.
So following on from that, why didn't you go down that same route as your fellow colleagues in your class? Because you had many boxes to tick, and ticking some of those boxes at that time would have propelled you forward, and you'd have got advantages because of that. So what stopped you ticking those boxes?
Well, partly I think I got lucky in that, again, I know it sounds weird to say, but basic background and upbringing, and maybe genetics, personality, what I learned from my parents was not to fall into that trap. My father was taught me, and also to add to that story, my mother came here. My father is under house arrest in Iran. He's a political rebel, basically, and he's been under house arrest for like over 10 years, 15 years, and I haven't seen him obviously since. And I'm banned from going there because I'm cancelled by Iran, basically. They'll kill me. But partly because of, you know, the family upbringing and the standards of education. But I think mostly because, and also I'm just a contrarian. If you tell me what to do something, I'm going to do the opposite. Actually, because I was talking to you about, we both did accounting, and I did the accounting finance in Manchester. And then more at university, the whole atmosphere is, you're going to become an accountant. You're going to have to study this. That made me not become an accountant. It's so funny. But most of it is because you said tick boxes. Funnily enough, I wasn't good enough to tick those boxes. Whether it was in that school in Lewisham, I wasn't brown enough. Persians, Iranians are not categorized as oppressed. We're still basically white. We're treated as white. And just basically, I'm not in any of those categories. Even if I wanted to be kind of going with victim culture, apparently well, firstly I'm a traitor to my race, according to the left. But they also called me, actually I remember, I literally was here outside, what's it called, the center, the conference center? Yeah. I was walking, it was a Tory conference up with the venues over there, and walking with, back in the day when I was a Tory, walking with, it was 2011 I think, 2010, 2011, walking outside the conference zone with 2 other Tory friends. I was in the middle, walking, and there was a couple like protesters, but for everything. There was a random guy, 3 of them protesting for badges, and the guy just shouts at me. I was the only technically non-white, and the other 2 were white Tory guys, friends. He just shouted saying, "You can't be a Tory, you're not white, you're Uncle Tom." And I was, firstly, these things never, like, I didn't care about any of these. I just like turn around, like, wave. But the story is that, firstly, every time I get like any level of racism or anything like this from the left, and it's always like inaccurate, is Uncle Tom or coconut. I thought that applied to black people. I'm not really sure why. I'm just a bad cup of tea. I'm just like milky tea. But that was it. And I didn't really care. But weird enough, Nick Robinson of the BBC was there, and he started tweeting. 10 minutes later, I had Sky News in my face on BBC, interviewing me, pretending about trying to claim that, change the narrative to, "Oh my God, are you feeling okay? You're the victim. Did it hurt you? Like, what do you have to say?" And I was like, "All right, just a nutter, just shouting. Like, it's just an insult." I treated whatever they said, even like a racist like comment saying, "Go back to your country," anything that people say, I treat it the same way if someone say you're a wank. It's the same thing. It's just an insult. Just move on, live your life. It's a crazy person. If everybody treated it like that, with basic racism or basic, like any kind of insulting sentence, most of it is just words, just ignore it. I'll be more worried if that turns into an escalated physical violence, like, dragging you on the train and sending you to like a detention center. That's where we have to stop. But if someone is shouting at someone, like, "Go home," like, what, Lewisham? No, I don't want to go back there.
How much other abuse do you get, especially online? We spoke to Calvin Robinson a couple of months ago, and we all know he gets tremendous abuse. Do you get a lot of abuse? And if you do, you seem to already know how you handle it, as in you just ignore it because they're idiots.
Well, there's a level. I feel left out sometimes. I don't have that many haters. But when I get them, the YouTube comments and tweets, I just take a screenshot and I post them with like my own caption. It just reply with a joke, and they just get angry even more. Sometimes like someone like leaves like an essay of like attacks, like why you're wrong, Mahyar, like this, and you're this and all that, and then I just reply at the end, wrong, and then just get angry. Wrong. Yeah, that's how you respond. I
spent 15 minutes writing that, and you just go wrong.
Like,
spent 15 minutes.
Yeah, usually I either go wrong or you're drunk, you need to go home. Go home. Ironically, I'm the drunk one.
We all know there's no point getting to debate with people like that, because that's what they want. They want the attention. They want to know that they've affected you, or you've read it, or it's the best thing is to do is to ignore it.
Exactly.
So you've been running your channel now for quite a long time. We are the media, so many posts every day.
Not today.
Not today, because he's here.
Blame him.
As an individual, what do you think are the biggest problems in the UK at the moment? The 1 or 2 biggest problems we have?
The political spectrum or the ideological spectrum getting messed up. It's all completely mixed and confusing. There's no such thing as left or right anymore. And that, there's an element of like positive to it, like, oh good, we're moving to a new stage, new level of battle. It's mostly power, freedom versus control and order. But it's also confusing enough for people, even good people, that want to still play in it or do the right thing, that we don't know where to go and what to do. So we just stand in the corner shouting, and that's a problem. But the biggest threat is, because of that, it's kind of created a bit of a... You always had a loud minority and a silent majority. But then now you have both sides or all sides, they have their own version of loud minorities, which is quite tricky, and we've all made that mistake at times. Whether it was during the lockdown days, the debate, whether it was low taxes, high taxes, pro-fracking, anti-fracking. Sometimes we just get frustrated and we make the same mistake as the traditional liberal left, and we just shout without actually rallying the troops like we're doing today. I think if we don't have a coherent kind of vision as people, any group of people, to be like, okay, how do we fix things, as you were saying? Do we even like bother creating a party or starting or standing for public office as independent? The lack of action is the biggest threat. It's not really the threat itself, because the threat's always been there. There's always a threat. There's been a threat of the Soviet Union. There's been a threat of now WEF. There's a threat of everything. Climate change. There's everything. There's always a threat. But there's always been some sort of solution. There's always been some sort of approach, whether from the left or right or center, for any of those specific problems. But everyone's all over the place. And I'm not just talking about us, people involved, institutions, the media, political system, parties, activists, campaigners, humanitarians and all this. That's the biggest problem, that there's no discipline. And I think I'll take it back to the problem of the West that me and my mom noticed when we came here. We lost the basic values that gave us discipline and order, societal order, whatever you want to call it when it comes to education, the Victorian education style. Even the minimum version of it should have maintained. Like basic discipline, basic respect, basic objective, and having goals, having dreams. That created early days America. We don't have dreams. We don't really have, I mean by we, I'm talking about mostly young people, like out there, especially in London, for the love of God. There's no discipline, there's no respect for not just the elderly or parents, but authority or anybody, for their own community. Everyone is all over the place. People live in areas, especially like young people in London, they don't even know their neighbours. They don't have respect for their own street outside the door. They just like throw the rubbish even outside their own door. There is no respect for having any business or employment or creating community groups to do something. So no one's doing anything, as in by no one, I mean them, the masses. We could sit here and keep ranting, but nothing's being done. That's the problem.
Yeah. So for me, part of that, well, the main part of that is, first of all, individualism has gone too far.
Yeah.
As in, we think now the crux of everything is me. Now, part of that's true. It should be about me, but it also should be about community, family, and country.
Yep.
We've seemed to have ignored that now. It's just purely about me. And the other thing is how much you think tribalism has affected this, where many people now have a view, not because they believe it or understand it, it's because I've been told this is what my side thinks, so therefore
yep.
I'm on this side.
Yeah, so again, initially when it's tribalism, I think we're going to talk about collectivism, because that's different. I'll get to tribalism after this, because it's about, everything's about a football team, like team this, team that. But the individualism, it's now, because even you would say it's gone too far, because that's how it seems, obviously. So then some people, their solution is, whether from the far left or the nationalist right, their solution is just more collectivism. You shouldn't really go full on Ayn Rand, like complete like individualism, objectivism, which is basically like no unity, no umbrella, even as a nation or anything, or a flag. And then you have collectivism, which came from either Mao or Marx or Soviet, like right now, President Xi, you're doing for everything for the flag of the country, but not in a patriotic way, in a fake nationalist way. It's collectivism. And the nationalist right also do the same thing, and they have done in the past. The solution is what was working here for about 10 minutes, and what created America for 10 minutes, which was, you had basic, it shouldn't really be called collectivism. As I said, it's the values of, well, family values, basic patriotism, and believing in your community and your small tribes, caring about your neighborhood and your county and your country and your borders in a very soft British power way. At the same time, it also went hand in hand with individual liberty. So you're a free man, you're a free Englishman. Also then Americans then created their own, like, I want to be free. That balance worked. If you go full on individual liberty, which is, again, that's still like a nice word, it should just be called selfishness. If you go full on like that, you're not going to have any respect for your own, let alone your country or flag, but actually your family. The rate of marriage is going down. The rate of people having babies, actual native Brits, going down. So if we actually, well, we say we have to obviously tackle the level of migration, not just illegal, but also mass legal migration, it makes sense that the establishment, even subconsciously, they just allowed it to happen. It's because we stop having babies, and we stop having families, the actual Brits. So you're going to have to sort that out, but you're going to have to find a way to somehow bring back the positives, the benefits of having basic British values, family values. That's the problem.
My final question is, sometimes we can all feel the blackness of...
Racist.
Racist is a lie.
We can all feel the darkness of future. We see so many problems, and you're right, we've always had problems. And our problems today are nothing compared to our problems 100 years ago, where problems then was about, will my child last the night? I've got 8 kids, will any of them see 10 years old? Will I have enough food in the morning? Will I have a job? So we've always had problems, we always will have problems. But that doesn't matter when we look 100 years ago, we have problems now. Are you optimistic, pessimistic? 10 years from now, do you think we'll be in a better place or a worse place?
Oh dear God. So, I'm usually the eternal optimist, but I have short-term pessimism to create the long-term optimism. On the one hand, I still trust the system, but the system, I'm not talking about the establishment system, the overall the psychology of our Western world. Now, whether it's going to be us kicking off and fighting back, or whether we push the people in power and having better people in power to change it before it kicks off. So overall, 10, 20, 50 years, all that, but there will be, bumps in the road. And it's not really to say to be complacent, it could be anything. It could be war with China, it could be complete collapse of the whole of the financial system, like properly, not like 2008. It could be anything. But I still have short-term pessimism, which is, it still doesn't feel like we are waking up, we are becoming woke. And it feels like, and it's a very classic human paranoia and irrationality that you always feel like this is the end of the golden days. But it does seem like if we don't do anything about it, I think we should just call it the Western Empire, which has been for the past about 100 years, and our countries, seems to be like going towards the end of it at least. It will come back eventually. Everything's about a cycle, by the way. You had the Eastern civilization first, the West, and the West came back, East went up, and it's coming back up. But we're not going to be alive, but it will come back up again. But the problem is, it's still young. Look at the Roman Empire. Obviously, even that ended, but it lasted for centuries. We've only been going for about 100 years. Like, generally speaking, what we know, is basically about 100-ish years. It wasn't like this medieval times, post-Enlightenment. It was basically around the Industrial Revolutionary times and onwards, and especially since the First and Second World War, that this so-called stability and so-called fake unity of the Western nations. It's still young. It shouldn't really go down, yet it feels like it's going to go down-ish. Not to kind of exaggerate, to be like it's going to be some sort of like dystopian, like end of the world, like everyone's going to be walking on the desert. But even a version of ending is too soon. So whilst I'm pessimistic that, oh my God, it feels like this is like, if we're not doing anything about it, things will change, whether with the rise of China, taking over or whatever. But maybe that means, don't be complacent, but maybe that means it's not going to end. Whether it's us fighting back, or whether people in power, they realize and they come up with a better solution than just Davos meetings. I don't know, something.
Yeah, well, it is going down, but I don't think it's going down in the fighting going down sense. I think it's capitulating.
Yes, it's just quite lazy. Just
it's
sleepwalking
capitulating and it's just
and I think
supplicating
that's happening because we still need to realise we still have it so good. And once things start getting worse, which it could start happening now with the prices of energy and food, and we don't have tomatoes and cucumbers in the shops. Can you imagine 10 years ago someone saying there's going to be a shortage of cucumbers and tomatoes? Everything is beginning to collapse, and we will get, and if we get poorer, things will change dramatically.
But we're being made to feel guilty for having had it so good for so long. That's why.
Yeah. But once the pain hits, people then will demand, and politicians will react to that demanding, because what they don't want is demonstrations in the street, and what we're not great at in the UK is revolution, so we'll never get to revolution. We're going to take questions. I've got Trevor first, then you, and then you. So Trevor, if you could all speak loudly.
Yes, Mahyar. I sort of agree with your overall analysis of what may or may not happen. But I just think that you can read the signs and read them wrong.
Sure, of course.
Right? You can't compare now to 200 years ago, right? Or 200 years ago, or whatever, or how long the Roman Empire lasted, right? Or any of that, right? Because it's the 21st century, and everything's moving very fast, right?
That's true.
Financially, technologically, everything is just moving, accelerated, right? And I think we're at a stage now where there's a crunch coming, right? It's not a question of, you know, will there be a recession or that? Yeah. No, a crunch is coming. When I say a crunch, I mean people who've got a different worldview, who want to impose that worldview as strongly as possible, right? And as comprehensively as possible on the world, in particular the Western world.
Sure.
That exists, right? And just to clarify what these different worldviews are, right? We're used to traditional worldview, right? Which is Britain, right? British people decide what happens in Britain.
Yep.
And France is France, and Germany is Germany, and all these other, America's America, and all that, right? And people have got their own national identity, right? And you say, oh, we want patriotism. No, we want nationalism.
Yeah.
Right? I say it out loud, nationalism. Which doesn't mean imperialism, which doesn't mean go and conquer other countries and have empires. It means that you determine your own self. And that's one view, which we should hold, which I hold anyway. And the other view is globalism, right? And all of these things, like climate change, right, for example, which is the most comprehensive one. It's the most comprehensive. I mean, that's what most people buy into. Yes, if we don't do this, that and the other, the climate's going to end. And only global solutions can solve this. Right? That's one. And the other thing is all this woke stuff that's being imposed. That's being imposed everywhere. Right? So I think that under Davos and the World Economic Forum and so on. So I mean, I think that's all linked together, and that's one vision, right? And we've got to defend the traditional national, you know, vision of national independence and self-determination of nations and peoples. And I think that, I genuinely think, and people say they don't know if they're left or right, right? Well, that's the real divide.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So, my question is, what do you think of that?
I knew there was going to be a question at the end of it, but the question was 3 words.
If it was something I would disagree with, I would just said wrong. But it's not. No, obviously, yeah. Nationalism, obviously. But the issue we have, whether we like it or not, we've been living in a world, even since just post-ancient times, actually even included the ancient times, in humanity on this planet, there's always an element, again, it's all about chaos and order. We've always been living in the same model, it's just the word's been changing. It's empires and world police. It's not a good thing, but that's just always been the default position. The word has always been changing. You know, the world police we call the America post-Second World War now, and empires were like British Empire, French Empire, Roman Empire, and all that. But we actually still have that. We could just call it world order. It's the same thing. So we have the world police, that is basically America or NATO, essentially, which is America. Then you've got the empire, which we call the Western world order. It's basically the American empire. But everything, it's not like there's a figurehead in America running it. It's the Americanism, which was actually the child of Britishism at the time, which became more ambitious. Everything from Hollywood that controlled the narrative of, not just narrative, the industry of entertainment. It's not necessarily Hollywood as in like, ooh, the people in Hollywood. The actual, the concept. That's and the internet is the reason that the English language is now the international language. Everyone keep thinking, oh, it's the British Empire that created. No, 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 no. It was mostly post-British Empire, the internet and Hollywood spread the English language across the world, that it became the dominant language. And also it was easier to understand than the French. And everything else, the financial system, the banking system is based on the dollar. The so-called democratic systems is based on the American, not necessarily the voting system, any of that, but the American democracy. Whether it's a republic or constitutional monarchy, it's the same thing. They have NATO, they have EUs, they have UNs, they have WHOs, they have everything. That's the world order, which is basically imperialism. But the imperialism always it's always been sounded like a tyrannical sort of thing. It's just control. It's not a good thing, but it's been the world we live in. So, having said that, we want nationalism. It's not just patriotism. We want nationalism for each country. But the problem is that we still haven't found the third wave, essentially, the way to do nationalism. Like, for example, because of what I said, imagine if all countries were just them, just nationalists on their own, and isolationists, not do anything really with each other. There will always be at least one or two countries nearby who become more powerful, who will become a threat and become attacking you. And that's why they think, that's what they think, and that's why they keep pushing for more globalism. And that's just paranoia. If you have a level of actual nationalism, self-determination, not going with globalism, but actually being respectful and having like the level playing field, you don't need globalism. You could just have basic trade. You don't need to, you need to just go look after your own people first. Britain first, America first. Nothing wrong with it, there's nothing racist about it. Stop giving more powers to faceless entities to decide for your own people. And that's the problem. You need to just go back to basic, like actual nationalism, to be proud, nothing racist about it, nothing xenophobic about it. We're not just looking after our own people because we hate people from different continents or countries. But apparently it's a taboo, and that they did it on purpose. The whole education system and everything else, cultural institution, the brainwashing since the 50s and 60s, all these things were included to make these words a taboo. Nationalism is a taboo. Or if you're basically not carrying a rainbow badge, then you are basically the evil person that you should be. And that's a problem. Just because you're not carrying the rainbow flag doesn't mean you want to kill the gay guys. Like it shouldn't be like that. Yeah. But everything else you have to go. This is the new collectivism. This is the Western world or the collectivism. It's the same way as we see footages from like China in schools. Everyone walking the same way. All the kids doing the same thing. Everyone's like saluting the same way. It's the same thing we're doing, but like a bit more quieter, a bit more like invisible. It's the same thing. Everyone taking the knee, everyone doing this, everyone having the pink hair. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Right, I know that like you've spoken
a little
bit about like having people that give ideas and way forwards, right? And I know that it seems like a very tall order, but it's just like, we as a group of people, right, there are many of us, and your audience as well, it covers, 250,000 people, but there are so many other people that do not agree with the agenda that the WEF is trying to implement, which is unelected. Yeah. They've openly said, we are infiltrating the government's cabinets, and we're very proud of that. They've made it very clear of their intentions. Also with NATO, encroaching on the borders of Russia, but yet the Western media is not covering that. They shut down RT because they didn't want the media to cover that, on the truth on their side. So then it's a balanced hearing both sides of the stories. It makes me wonder of when many people collectively come together instead of listening to their dissonance and their distraction techniques to divide people, that why can we not approach these guys in a rational and very calm and rightful way to say, right, we want to invite you to a seminar, all you guys, WEF, WHO, NATO, UN, it's like, and the political heads, because Rishi is not our elected Prime Minister. Well, we want to host you in a seminar, and we will pose our questions. We will provide, professional experts that will speak about how climate change is not even an argument. If we had no CO2, then life on this planet would not exist. So what, you know, to be able to question these people in a controlled environment, because they're trying to create a controlled environment for us, yeah, so it's like, well, why not turn that on them and say, right, okay, if this is so like great, then let's have you here so we, the people, can question you, and let's debate it. Yeah, prove your worth and we'll prove ours. So it's like collectively. I know that it's a very difficult question for you to sort of like answer. It's more of an idea posing. What do you think the reality of something like that ever happening?
Yeah. So the overall point, which is basically how can we the people who are not in the position of power, at least at best, invite them to sit down, and then both sides to just at least at best have a conversation, have a debate. The reality is, I agree, the reality is we still live in a world where everything is based on hierarchy and also authority and figurehead. We no longer have thinkers. We no longer have solution creators. So we have advocates. You have, for example, Nigel Farage and Mahyar Tousi on this side. You've got Russell Brand and Jeremy Corbyn on the left side. But a Jeremy Corbyn or not Russell Brand or Mahyar Tousi or Nigel Farage can't really knock on the door of the so-called entity of the establishment, anybody who they are, to say, even politely, hi, can you come have a meeting with us? 20 of us here, 20 of you there. At least let's have a chat. It doesn't work mainly because these figures that I mentioned, the 4 of them at least, to the other side and the impartial side, people are just like watching. We all seem as we're still doing something, but we are not necessarily just echo chamber, but we seem more like the people who are rallying their troops, not necessarily those who could just also be like, we also want to reach out. So they also have to have someone to reach out. It's not just our responsibility, the so-called faceless establishment, and whatever you want to call it. But if we start to have thinkers, and I'm not just going to talk about wishy-washy academic philosophers, basic thinkers that we had, and that's how we created the golden days of the West. So even economically, it was the Hayeks, it was the Milton Friedmans, or in different areas, or even back in the day, you had in the ancient Greeks and the communities. But now we don't really have anybody. So the so-called thinkers or solution makers are coming from the establishment. They're not really that philosophical, but they are by nature academic and by because no one else is there. There's a vacuum, and they fill it. And why not? Of course they're going to do it because we're not doing it. And by we, I'm not talking about we, anybody else from any other side. So I don't really blame the people who go into the establishment and they become the elite. Someone has to do it. Unfortunately, it's the wrong solutions. So I absolutely agree with you. Spot on, yeah.
And can I just add to that?
Yeah.
It's not about us trying to hold those leaders to account and getting them to change what they think, because what they think doesn't really matter. We need to understand the nature of the beast. And the nature of politicians is to be elected again.
Yeah, that's the main intention.
If we're going to change our country, we need to empower the people at the bottom who don't vote, who think it's a waste of time, who want change. We need to spend our time on them. You cannot change a Rishi Sunak, Billy, because all he cares about is being elected again to a certain extent. All politicians are afraid of the voter. We don't think we have the power, we think we're powerless. It only seems that way because we have the vote. The problem is the vast majority of people don't use it. That's the problem.
I said that to Chris Green about attracting the non-voters, and he disagreed with me. It was just like,
well, Chris Green of Bolton. And he's a good friend, and of course, and even though he's like a lovely guy, of course he will say that, and he will actually believe that, and it's not really his fault. Spot on. The system that I said that's been basically working based on controlled chaos and controlled instability is that, and I'm going to use the word beauty, it's not a compliment, but it's a beauty, it's a dark beauty of how it's been, for now, stable, this bubble. It's because the voters and the little people, you get the basic illusion of power and democracy, but at the same time, you also given frustration. So you get both. You've been given both. That you know, hey, I do vote. I queued and voted, but the next day, oh, my votes didn't count. That's included at the same time. And with the politicians, whether it's councillors or MPs or senators, there's also control on that side, on them, the system. Short-termism. They are more obsessed about not losing the next election. So the solutions that they come up with is just short-term, plasters. You're going to make an announcement. Yeah, I'm going to do something. Leveling up. What on earth is leveling up? Nothing's going to get done. And the system is built to prevent, well, firstly it's control, but to prevent any bad, potentially wrong person or wrong time getting into position of power to have a long-term plan, but a bad long-term plan. Like President Xi. So President Xi, all the President Xis throughout history, because of the power they have, long-termism, some of them have, at times, done the right thing. You know, they have the flexibility of time for the next 10, 20 years to do whatever they want. They did build autobahns in the 30s, for example, in Germany. But they also, the problem with that is too much flexibility, and humans have that paranoia. Then what if that power would give them that flexibility to also do the next 10, 20, 50 years? Tyranny, like in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it's a lose-lose situation, because we don't really want that much flexibility, but we also don't want this, because as I say, it's just too much short-termism. You know, they want us to be frustrated, but they also want us to vote, so we're like, hey, I get excited for 10 minutes, but then you go home and get crazy. But they also don't really give enough power to the politicians, because they're just short-termism. So the faceless people in the back, the academics that go to Davos that have an idea, their ideas get implemented anyway, because it doesn't matter if it's Rishi, or Keir Starmer, or Jeremy Hunt, or anybody else. So the real ideas that they have, you know, the systems, they're all implemented anyway. But the ones that we want, because we have to knock on the door of Chris Green, they won't be implemented, because Chris Green is more obsessed with, oh, I'm going to lose my seat in 2 years. That's the problem.
Yeah. Two more questions. This gentleman and then Rob, last question.
Yeah.
Nick, all it is my question is, it's not so much a question, but just throw it out there. We talk about big government and we talk about major politicians, but the problem started at the grounds on the floor, the feet on the floor, the workers.
Yeah.
Big companies now, they're so woke that young lads, if you talk about the lad with a 25-year-old, they have to conform, otherwise they won't have a job.
Sure.
Where do we move on from that? Because I've worked in a company for 30 odd years, and from when I started to nearly, and I'm thank goodness I'm nearly out of the place, it's transformed massively. If you say the wrong thing, you're out. You know, if you don't conform, you're out. And it's not about racism, it's not about
not being open-minded,
it's if you get over it, saying the wrong thing, you're gone. You know. Now we've got to move on from that sort of nonsense, because these are brainwashing young people, and that's my problem.
Exactly. Yeah, as you say,
I've gone through it, but I can see how they brainwash young people. If you don't wear the right lanyard, if you don't do the right thing,
didn't tweet the right thing. Yeah, exactly. As I say, it's not just about big government these days. It's again, it's a battle of new version of collectivism, and it's not just the wokeism of corporations that's become a problem, which is again collectivism. It's moral mentality. It's also the other thing that corporatism is doing. The other stuff that basically becoming big business going hand in hand with big government is undermining the basic values of free market capitalism, which was never supposed to be corporatism. What we now have is state corporatism, which is basically what China's doing. There's not much that difference. So it's actually undermining those of us who still want to promote basic free market capitalism, which is still could go hand in hand with safety net. It could go hand in hand with basics and protection for workers, and not making sure that the bosses get too much power. We can still have that, but we can't anymore, because the word is undermining the other word. The one C word is destroying the other C word, corporatism and capitalism, and that's the biggest problem. Because you're right, the woker stuff is a threat, because obviously it's undermining free market capitalism, the economic model, but even though it's not, it's supposed to be a social mob rule mentality. It's destroying the culture, because it's creating too much pressure for a lot of people to be like, fine, I'll just follow the crowd, I'll wear a unicorn hat, just walk around. And then it basically provokes a lot of people who are not racist. You're creating new racists accidentally, like, or new homophobes, because you're shoving them to their throats so much that people are going to be like, I'm going to attack Pride this year on Twitter. And these people are fine with Pride, like 10 years ago. A lot of like normal people, like, just, they just didn't care. They didn't go to it, but they didn't really go and attack them. Everyone was fine. But then the more they did it, and the more they do it, and also what else they're doing, is that you basically, the other side, the collectivist side, you are creating a new accidental racist and homophobes. They're not racist themselves. They're just, it's a backlash. You provoke them, they're going to poke you back. Yeah. And like, you guys are the ones who keep saying, we have to be anti-fascist, because they're the ones who are like being proactively creating hate. No, they're reactionary. By definition, whether it was fascism, or hard right, or nationalism, or conservatism, small c conservatism back in the day, it's a reactionary thing. It's not an ideology. It's a set of values that you just react to. They don't want to promote anything new. You can't really have the far right being a proactive force for spreading hate. You are the ones who keep poking them. Yeah. You are creating more so-called far right. It's not, and I hate that fucking two words. But yeah.
Well, they control
the narrative. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But there'll be a backlash.
Last question, Bob.
Yeah. To go what y'all were talking about and stuff like that, I think if anybody is waiting for a government or big business or whatever to save us, you are wasting your time and you're wasting your energy.
Yeah.
How this is going to change, and I do believe that it will change. I do believe that it will change in these woke companies and all this other stuff. Is you see what? Why did it take $44 billion for Elon Musk, to give us free speech on Twitter?
Yeah.
Now, if he hadn't done that,
like
we'd still be shut. We'd still be shut down.
Exactly.
We'd still be shut down right now.
Yep.
This is what it's going to be. It's going to be the people coming saying, we've had enough, a tipping point, and you see it in the States right now.
Yep.
You see parents, when they start going after their children and saying, your little boy can be a little girl, that's a step too far. And you see the American parents coming back and running for these offices and stuff like that. That's where you're going to see this change. And the British people, God bless y'all. It's not there yet, but it's getting there because you see what's going on in the education system. And if you don't know what your children and grandchildren are learning in school, shame on you. This is on you. This is not on them. You need to assume what they're learning is indoctrination. And that's how it's going to change. But I do believe, I know I sound like I'm just, but it's going to be the alternative media. God bless the internet for people like you who's taken advantage of, who've gone around the system, and Nick and everybody else who's doing it, because there are a lot of us who are listening to these things, and these companies, these alternative companies being built. You know what, you're going to go for all this woke stuff? You ain't getting my money. I'm going to go to another company who's going to support that. And you can see these, you see it in the States with these different, you can pick your state that matches your values. You can't do that in this country, but you see it in the United States, and it's a gift in a certain way, but it's so tragic in other ways because people are so separated and have just had enough of it and stuff like that. But I think, I mean, what's your thought on it?
So yeah, and there are two main points. One was your worry about Brits, come on, you're still behind. And the main point, which was about don't rely on the saviour, Messiah kind of figure. The first one, the Brits, don't worry about that. It's just a classic Brits or the slow kids these days. The jazz was created in America.
Very much ahead on transgenderism. They were known as Turf Island.
No. We're talking about the common sense. Obviously, even though we created this mentality, the Anglosphere created America, but ever since America became this ambitious child that decided to get bigger and bigger, everything that they do, we're a little bit behind. So they did jazz. And it took us, what, 20, 30 years until we actually accepted jazz? So we'll get there. The backlash that started with DeSantis in Florida, it'll be here in about 65 years. So one day we'll fight back. One day we'll be like DeSantis. But that's a joke. But the first one, yes, you're right. We shouldn't rely on the messiahs. Firstly, because the model is also not stable. What if, even right now, I'm sure there will be some people in the room that overall, even if they kind of are okay with the fact that Elon Musk, at least he was the one who bought Twitter and like got rid of the idiots, they might not completely agree with him, or they might not completely trust him. But even that aside, even let's just say Elon Musk is still good. You know, yeah, he helped us. He won the battle. Who's to say that even an Elon Musk, because this mechanism, as you say, it's not a right solution. What if, in about 6 months, in about 6 years, for some reason, he becomes a baddie? He either hit his head, becomes a psycho, or he was always like the baddie, just like kept it quiet. We gave him too much power on Messiah that he can now use it against us. That's the fear. Don't give too much power to anybody. Don't create Jesuses. That's a bad idea. There's no reason to like do that. There was a reason. There was only one Jesus. You can't do that. It's a bad idea. And so ideally you want a different mechanism, different solutions. You don't rely. And the thing is, we keep doing it. All of us. A lot of us go right and left, or new right and new left. Because we get frustrated, the solutions we have goes to a little bit collectivism. We say, okay, so the fisheries deal with the EU is bad. And especially before, it was more the French taking over, like our British waters. So maybe the solution is to basically do more authoritarianism and basically take over their fisheries, like quotas. Like, no, but the solution is just do freedom. Like, do self-determination. And when they say, like, okay, in order to not support this side, we're going to have to support the other side. Like, you're literally fueling the fire. It's not really the right solution. And we have to be careful. If we're promoting self-determination and freedom and British values, we shouldn't accidentally, and I've made that mistake sometimes in my head when I think about solutions, we shouldn't really accidentally do our version of authoritarianism that they are doing. Whether it's the certain specific type of communists or the new liberal globalist side, they are already doing collectivism and authoritarianism. The solutions that we come up with shouldn't be like that. It should be more about actual common sense.
Some of it's tactical though, isn't it? I mean, like the Trumpian whole, if you want 70, ask for 100. And
oh yeah, I mean that's different.
Like Thatcher said.
Oh no, that's narrative. You're right.
Further left, if we keep this stiff upper lip conservatism.
No, that's it. The Trumpian mentality is very specific because you say it's tactical. Absolutely. The wider message, he never said it out loud, but it was still what I'm promoting. So for example, he would come out and say, "This trade deal with NAFTA is bad." So the pro-trade neoliberal side, globalist side, they freak out like, he's anti-trade. But he only said that to renegotiate it, to do a better deal. He's actually pro-trade. He said, oh, I admire Putin. And they're like, oh, he loves Putin, he's best friends with Putin. But he was doing that to basically, he's a bluff, he's a perfect poker player, to control the crazies in the Kremlin side. That obviously their NATO was doing this thing, and then Kremlin side were doing that thing. He could have at least short-term prevented this chaos, at least if he was in power, at least short-term. Same thing we did with King Jong-un. He was threatening him, like, you're a rocket man, we're going to kill you. That brought him to the table. He did the same thing with the Arabs, with the Abrahamic Accord. You know, he was threatening them, but he brought them and the Jews together. I mean, even temporarily, even for the second. That's the beauty of Trumpism.
Let's end on this one point, which is
racism. Keep going back to
that. Which is, if you want to have a better country, the first step is look within you, and you be a better version of you.
Oh, what a hippie! I love
and
it.
Stop giving your personal responsibility to someone else to fix the country. It starts with you. And while we're clapping,
that's very Michael Jackson.
And while we're clapping, a big round of applause for Mahyar for coming back.